Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Are you all feeling richer after yesterday's budget? Nope. Me either. I wonder how many Teslas went up for sale. Used Teslas went up for sale this morning. My guess is quite a few. Good morning, everyone. How the devil are you doing this fine day? I'm going to say a few good mornings over on Instagram. Lucas Jurgens has just joined us. Verge Daniel has joined us. Patrick Masker has joined us. Alessandro Palumbo has joined us. Busy over there. Morning, groupies, says Chris Ford. May your breaker never go blunt. Down to a nub now, I'm afraid, my friend. Down to a nub. Gary Muirhead has just joined us as well. Good morning, guys. Let's have a look. Jim Turner is here. Dan Cullum is here first, obviously, because Dan's always here first, saying, yo, 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 good morning. It's going to be a ho, 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 good morning, I would have thought. Dan says, yeah, knew that was coming. Too good to be true. Yeah, absolutely. What was the leak about? What was the leak about? Was that trying to get a few people on side before they dropped the bombshells? I wonder if it was. Ken Hatcher is here as well, who has all the weather, and it's quite cold here as well, actually, which is a bit of a shame because I'm going to walk to my local hairdressers today, sort out my mop ahead of tomorrow's funeral. Excuse me. Yeah, it's going to be a chilly one out there. So yesterday afternoon, obviously post budget, my inbox, my email inbox lit up. It always does in the aftermath of a major announcement like the budget. The inbox always lights up. So I thought, well, what I'll do, I'll just collate all of that and put it into a document, which I've done. Rather than trawling through page after page of statistics and tables and everything else, I thought I'd produce a document that basically gave the industry's reaction to yesterday's budget, the good and the bad. Now, we're going to be talking about it at the end of the show, but just ahead of that, now, if you're in our WhatsApp group, you've probably already seen this anyway, but it's called Budget 2025, The Industry Reacts. I can't even remember how long it is, 6-7 pages, but it will give you a pretty good idea of what everyone made of yesterday's budget. Read it at your leisure. It's free. It's just a downloadable PDF. Just press the button. It's on your desk or on your phone or whatever. Read it, enjoy it, consume it, see what you like. Yes, quick reminder, today is my final show of the week, but it's not the final show of the week. The show will be back tomorrow without me. I'll be dressed all in black by this time tomorrow, ready to go off to the funeral. So we've set up the Kevin Soller interview. That will drop at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. No, it won't. It'll drop at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if you are around, if the usual time, just tune in as you normally would, and you will get to listen to that conversation. And I promise you, I probably say this about every conversation that we have, but it really is an absolute corker. Gary Muirhead says, is this correct? Electric cars will be charged at 3p per mile, and petrol and diesel cars can drive all year round without a charge. There is something along those lines. Yeah, there is some. I think one of the things that really struck me about this was, I know everybody said, everybody's leapt on the whole notion of the Labour government in the run up to the general election, saying we will not increase taxes, and then lo and behold, they increase taxes because they always do that. But one of the things that really did surprise me, which seems to have, I wouldn't say it's flown under the radar, but seems to have attracted a lot less concern and ire, is this what seems to be a bit of a step back from the sustainability drive. Again, one of the key drivers of the Labour government's pre-election manifesto was talking about its commitment to green causes and stuff. Well, they're making electric cars a lot less popular. They've taken a big step back from retrofit. So yeah, it's an interesting time. As I say, if you want to have a look at that document, you're free to do so. Jim says the cultural reset is already in top gear, but after yesterday's budget, it's now going to be in overdrive. Socialism is fucking shite. I think a few people are realizing that. There is and I promise I will get onto this though. I will get onto it in the morning monologue because that's kind of what it's about. But one of the things that struck me as odd going through all of the reactions yesterday. Now, to be clear, the reactions that I was receiving were from, experts and industry spokespeople and stuff. So you're probably talking about the upper echelons of the industry. I was genuinely shocked at the vitriol expressed in reaction to raising minimum wages. I'm sure it's probably an imbalance of those that are actually doing the speaking, but to actually come out in public and say that people being paid a level that is more reflective of the current cost of living, to actually stand up and say that's a bad thing, that's a it's a strange stance to take, isn't it? And listen, I realise there's wider implications here. I realise that if you own a company, or you're a major stakeholder in a company, and wages are forced up, it does put more cost onto your bottom line. It will affect your profit margins. It might ultimately affect the number of people you can employ, the number of people you can recruit, and so on down the line. I fully understand that, but there are some things probably best not said publicly. And I think that might be one of them. Put up wages? What a bloody liberty. Really? When people are struggling to pay their bills? Is that actually a bad thing? It's the closet commie coming out of me. I can only apologise. Dan says that's how they con people, buy electric and no tax or charges. Now they get caught out, waiting to see Uber prices go up, as TfL only wants drivers to have plug-in hybrid. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. But listen, I can't sit here being smug, because I fell for the same trick a good few years ago. Diesel will be cheaper than petrol. Invest in a diesel car. Diesel will be cheaper. And I bought one, and about 6 months later, diesel was actually more expensive than petrol. So I can relate to the pain that those electric car drivers are driving today. Or electric vehicles only, which is madness, also up the price of public charges. Yeah, yeah, they have. Yes, but petrol and diesel pay in the fuel cost. Electric cars pay nothing to the government, only electricity companies. All very true. Yeah, very true. Balanced argument. Well done. You'd have thought that people would have learned. The government encouraged people to buy diesels, and a few years later, shafted them. I'm putting my hands up as one of the shafted over here. Mark Whiting is here as well. Nothing surprises me anymore about this back chick government. Fair comment. Hang on a minute. There should be no minimum wage rules. We should live in a meritocracy. Not everyone is worth the same. Not everyone is worth the same. I grant you that. But you do need to be able to afford to live. You absolutely do need to be able to afford to live. So basically, the working man or woman fucked. Yes, because that's how budgets work. I said it to you yesterday before she'd even stood up, and I didn't get the leak, but before she'd even stood up, first they giveth, and then they taketh away. That's the way that budgets work. And the bizarre thing about it is, all of this is completely arbitrary. It's it doesn't need to be this way. They are responding to things of their own creation, by and large. It's just crazy, absolutely crazy. Anyway, people, should we crack on? Got a different flavoured show for you today, and it's quite funny actually. I was starting to worry about the period between now and Christmas, about the lack of plant videos that were coming down the pipes from the major manufacturers. So I pulled together today's show in a slightly different vein. Lo and behold, yesterday afternoon, there I was going through the interwebs. Plenty of plant videos out there. So this is going to be a bit of a special one-off. So without further ado, let me roll the intro and get this show on the road. And Ken is saying 1.5p a mile for me in 2028. with a tear in his eye. I bet you have got a tear in your eye as well. Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, the 27th of November. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming and the Walrus of Demolition. Normally do those the other way round. That sounded weird in my head. In today's Extreme Vehicle special show, Extreme Vehicles, in celebration of the mighty Unimog, the Sasquatch lives. It takes a special vehicle to get concrete to the top of the mountain, but we found one for you, and digging clay with an IH tractor and a K-Tec toad scraper. That's less of an extreme vehicle, but it's a good video nonetheless. Plus, in today's edition of Mark's Morning Monologue, the seesaw of popular opinion. That's what we'll be talking about when we get to there. I'm going to go over to the chat very quickly. Gary Muirhead, will they be looking to charge an excavator per hour tax? I wish I hadn't said that out loud, because if somebody in government is listening to this show, and I know Keir Starmer is a big fan of this show, that's going to be coming down the line. We've said it all along. If you switch from the current diesel, where there is a duty to pay, over to electric, where there is not a duty to pay, there'll be somebody in the Treasury looking at that and thinking, "Oh, we can't have that. That. If everybody switches to electric, we lose all of that fuel duty. Nope, that ain't happening on my watch. So watch this space. It's only a matter of time." Jim says, not every job has enough money in it to support a person fully. Young folk and unskilled folk should start on a low wage. Then as they prove themselves more useful, profit, creating their worth more. True, but you do still need to survive. And I know you're a big one for putting curbs on our benefit-led society. If you can't earn enough money to make ends meet, to feed yourself, to clothe yourself, to put a roof over your head, then surely the easy answer is just, oh, bollocks to work then. I'll go and put myself on the dole. There needs to be a balance, right? Gary saying, so electric excavators. Yeah, I wonder. And as we've seen with the electric cars, I wouldn't say it's necessarily come completely out of left field. I personally thought it was only a matter of time. But if the government are considering that, I mean, I don't know what the annual fuel duty paid by demolition and construction companies is, but it's going to be multi millions. Are the government just going to let that go, or are they going to go, nope, we'll have a bit of that if you don't mind? That would be my guess. Anywho, people, we're going to crack on. We're going to crack on as soon as I find the right button. We're going to crack on with, let's go with a bit of this first, and then we're going Unimog. I just knew that the budget was going to bring out the debate in us. Gary Muirhead says, you then start to have a devotion with two people doing the same job, but one's on a different rate to the other. Yeah, you do. I wish I could remember. I think it may have been Norway. I wish I could shout at Fred, but I think it's Norway. So the Norwegian system, they have a minimum wage, but it's not a national minimum wage. It's a minimum wage according to where you actually live. So if you live out in the sticks, way out, away from everywhere and everything else, you will be paid a living wage that is commensurate with your local expenses. If, however, you live and work in Oslo, for example, you are paid more. So the example that I read ages ago, and I'm going to do it in pounds. So let's say you work in, you know, way, way, way out in the boondocks at a McDonald's. You're paid, let's say, £5 an hour. If you work in a McDonald's in the centre of Oslo, where, like any major city, it's more expensive, you're paid 12, 15, £20 an hour. That seems to make sense to me. I don't know about you. Jim says, in my world, there wouldn't be any dull money. You'd get looked after, but not paid. Ken Hatcher, what about electric lorries? Yeah, was there any? I didn't see any announcement on electric lorries. I don't know if Peter McKenna is actually watching or whether he's still laid up on a ventilator. But Peter, have you seen anything on that? I'd love to hear from you. Then people will be queuing up to be skilled workers and be employed, or they'd be, queuing up to leave the country, quite possibly. Think that's a USA cat hitch. It may well be, although I was actually sent that advert from the Netherlands, so I'd be quite surprised. But maybe. And Jim says again, people should be on different rates. Some folk are better and more conscientious at work than other folk. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But I don't think there's any harm in bringing up an 18-year-old's wage, so at least he can afford to get to and from work. That's my take on it. As I say, I'm a bit of a lefty on the quiet. Despite the current government, I am a bit of a lefty, but maybe that's the aging punk in me coming out. I really don't know. Anyway, I've promised you Unimog. We've never featured Unimog on this show before. I've no idea why. I do remember the first time I ever went to an SED at Whipsnade back in the day, probably 1987 or thereabouts. There was a Unimog there. And I actually thought, wow, I've never seen anything even remotely like that. Well, they've continued to evolve it and evolve it and evolve it. You can keep your Cybertrucks and your G-Wagons and everything else. Money with no object. I'm having a Unimog. Bit of a slow ending to that. How have you only just noticed the hat? Gary Muirhead says, you're rocking the compo look today from Last of the Summer Wine. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Do you know, I actually went to, I wish I could remember the name of the bloody thing. Last of the Summer Wine, there was a cafe in it. It's a real cafe based in the centre of the town of Holmfirth, and I actually went there. Me and my mate went there with a couple of girls that we met, and it was quite weird because the cafe is real. They used to close it and do the filming, and then, but the weirdest thing was, I don't know if anybody remembers Last of the Summer Wine. Yes, thank you very much indeed. It was Sid's Cafe. So in Last of the Summer Wine, you would walk in, turn left, and there was the counter. In real life, you'd walk in, counter was right in front of you. And I'm sure it was down to lighting and camera angles and everything else, but they literally skewed it through 90 degrees. Yeah, see, there you are. Andy Thornton saying, I thought Benny was back. Yeah, Benny is back. It's cold and my hair's a bit tufty at the moment. I do need to go and get my noggin sorted out, which I'm planning to do after the show today. That's why when you get a good worker, you pay whatever it costs to keep them happy. They're the ones that make you the money. All true. All true. Slack workers cost you money. They do. They do. Why do you think I work for myself? Yeah. So we've had one extreme vehicle. We've got another one coming up in just a moment after.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
So when I was at the Utility Expo over in Louisville a few weeks, maybe a month or more ago now, actually, thinking about it, there was a couple of remarkable vehicles. There's one that I think most of us have seen, which is the Fat Truck. Had a good play around in the Fat Truck. Couldn't actually operate it, but got in it, crawled all over it. Fantastic thing. But there's another one, and it's called the Argo Sasquatch. Yes, the Bigfoot. It looks like this.
Introducing the all-new Argo Sasquatch XTX, the latest amphibious extreme terrain vehicle from Argo, which is designed for work and built to go where others can't. Early morning through to the late night, when there is a job to be done, the Argo Sasquatch XTX is the difference between can and can't. Find out more at argoxtv.com.
My apologies. Dog was going berserk out there, and I had to go and sort that out. My apologies for the absence. Going back to the chat, Jim says there's some talk. Yeah, they absolutely are. And here's an interesting one. Andy Thornton has just said, bloody hell, where in the UK do we need that? well, I would imagine that Gary Muirhead would thoroughly enjoy driving one of those to work in the Outer Hebrides or somewhere like that. But interestingly, not Argo, but when I met up with the guys at Fat Truck, I actually said, not much call for one of those where I come from in the UK. And he said, we're shipping 3 to the UK next week. Yeah, wouldn't tell me who to, because I'd love to go and have a play on one, I have to say. But yeah, that they're here, that they're here. I just don't know where they are. And maybe it's millionaires in their playgrounds or whatever it might be. Honestly, don't know. But yeah, they are here and they are at work, apparently. We've got one more properly extreme vehicle for you immediately after.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
I can hear myself again now. I've got my ears back in. Let's have a look what we got. Think they ought to have a self-righting arm on each side in case it goes over. I think they take some tipping. I really do think that. I mean, the lowest center of gravity you can possibly imagine, and an absolute. I mean, certainly in the. I think one of the Fat Trucks is actually powered by a Cat engine. It's an absolute animal. You would have to work pretty hard to tip one over. The other thing that I thought was interesting with that was the Sasquatch steering wheel, the Fat Truck joystick. Central joystick, which I would have thought would be quite hard to, particularly over that rough terrain where I thought that would have been quite hard, but hey, what do I know? I'm no expert. Anyway, I promised you another extreme vehicle, and frankly, they really don't get much more extreme than this. So you're building something at the top of a mountain. I don't know why you would choose that. Maybe it's a ski run or something like that. You're going to build something at the top of a mountain, so you need some concrete up there. How do you go about getting concrete to the top of a mountain? You do it like this. Wow. Wow. Andy Thornton says, looks like a scene from Thunderbirds. I think you're right. Nice use of a timber forwarder. Yeah, I mean, we are talking some serious grunt. I mean, what does a concrete mixer weigh? And did you see the angle? Did you see the angle of ascent there? Unbelievable. That's good preparation for tomorrow's show. I won't be here. I've already said that. I won't be here, but we've got a best part of an hour-long conversation with a guy who operates a Menzimark machine in precisely that kind of environment, up in the mountains, hanging on by his fingertips. That's what tomorrow's show will be all about. We've got one more film for you today. We'll be back after her.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, cheers to you too, love. Chris Ford says, bit extreme, but if money is no object, it's surprising what's possible. Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, I've never actually been skiing. I've been to ski resorts. I've been up ski lifts and stuff. I've never actually skied in my life. But I guess, there must be, well, it's a rich person's sport. If you're going to have a ski run, you need to put in the facilities at the top to get people up there, and if you do that, and that's going to pay you money for the next 100 years or so, maybe it is worth going to the expense of having timber forwarders and track mounted concrete crushers, concrete mixers and stuff. Amazing stuff. Anyway, we've done most of the extreme stuff now. This one is a bit more average, but still a bit unusual. Enjoy. Just going back to our previous video, the mountain top. I think I'd leave a small battery plant at the top, at the point of use. Take the gear up with crawler and box trailer would probably be quicker. Maybe. I would like to think, if you're going to the expense and the trouble of doing that, I would like to think they've done their maths. Who the hell knows? Who the hell knows? Anyway, people, that's about it for the main part of this morning's show. I've got a morning monologue, which is based around yesterday's budget and more specifically about the reaction to yesterday's budget. I'll do that in just a second. But I do need to remind you very, 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 very quickly, I won't be here tomorrow. I won't be here tomorrow. The show will, I won't. Please tune in because it is an absolute corker of a conversation. You'll thoroughly enjoy it, I promise you. But I won't be here. Jim says needs to work in pairs and push load. A lot of slipping going on in that video. Yeah, there was. There absolutely was. Right, should we go over to the morning monologue? I think we probably should. Let's have a look. Let me press this button, and I'll be back immediately. But I'm going to do the leaping gazelle, like you know what I do right about now. See you after this. The efficacy of any national budget is really judged on neutral economic facts alone. It's filtered through pre-existing biases, hopes and fears of its audience. And the Autumn Budget 2025, delivered by Chancellor Rachel Reeves, was no exception. For the UK construction sector, a vast ecosystem comprising giant contractors, small family-run firms and millions of individual tradespeople, the balance sheet was decided long before the Chancellor stood up. It was defined by whether one's personal or commercial interest was being served or sacrificed. For every measure welcomed by one segment of the industry, a contradictory fear was immediately voiced by another. And perhaps the most potent immediate contradiction is that of the labour cost increase. For the individual worker, the announcement of an increase in the legal minimum wage was probably positive news. The national living wage for over 21s will rise by 4.1% to £12.71 per hour in April, while the rate for 18 to 20-year-olds will jump 8.5% to £10.85 per hour, moving towards a single rate for all adults. Furthermore, minimum wages for 16 to 17-year-olds and apprentices will increase by 6% to £8 an hour. Now, those increases represent at least a degree of relief for low-paid workers grappling with persistent inflationary pressures. Yet, this relief for the employee immediately translated into a massive blow for the employer. Philip Pepper, employment partner at law firm Shakespeare Martineau, stated that this move was unexpected, especially coming so soon after a previous increase, and arrives concurrently with material costs remaining higher than ever. For the supply chain, the reaction was characterized by deep anxiety. Lee Wilcox, CEO and co-founder of On the Tools, spoke to the community, noting that higher wage bills, increased national insurance and frozen tax thresholds all squeeze the brickies, sparkies and plumbers already operating on wafer-thin margins. And that squeeze is not theoretical. Sean Keyes, Chief Executive Officer of Engineering Consultants at Sutcliffe, stated that these costs do not simply disappear into company accounts. Instead, firms face painful choices concerning recruitment, constrained pay rises for other staff, and the necessity to reprice existing projects. Keyes highlighted the core paradox. You cannot simultaneously increase the cost of employment while calling for economic growth. Something has to give. This fundamental tension means that the policy seen as social progress by the government risks triggering rises in restructuring, refinance, or exits entirely among small businesses, according to Julie Palmer, partner at restructuring specialist Begbie's Trainer. The contradictory responses were not just limited to labour costs either. They permeated the government's overall fiscal strategy. On one hand, the Chancellor's objective was clearly to ensure the government's finances appear on a firm footing, underpinned by a £26 billion package of tax increases. Well, that stability, however, came at the expense of discouraging private sector investment. Alan Wyland, economics director at Glenigan, stressed that while a firm financial footing was necessary, it's vital that the government doesn't damage already fragile investor confidence. Wyland warned that the plethora of new taxes announced by the Chancellor may deter private sector investment and ultimately frustrate growth objectives. Balancing act. A prime example of a measure that pleased the Treasury but dismayed business owners was the freezing of national insurance and income tax thresholds until 2031. That mechanism, which increases tax revenue without raising headline rates, is expected to drag around 780,000 more people into paying income tax by 2029, according to the Office for Budget Responsibility. Robin Clevitt, fixed radio show host, described this as a triple whammy alongside rising wages and business costs. A more targeted hit was aimed at contractors seeking to exit their businesses responsibly. Employee ownership trusts, a popular mechanism for demolition and construction firm owners to sell their company to their staff, currently benefit from a 100% capital gains tax relief. But Rachel Reeves announced this relief would be immediately reduced to 50%, saving £3.5 billion over the next 3 years. No, saving £3.5 billion over the next 6 years. This has been a popular exit plan in demolition circles these past few years. I can think of a number of those. So while this move might be fiscally prudent for the state, it potentially adds more uncertainty at the top end of the industry. And this high-end disruption contrasted sharply with the government's failure to address the struggles of SME house builders. Phil Hooper, CEO of Close Brothers Property Finance, expressed extreme disappointment that no new equity loan scheme was introduced to support smaller developers. While volume house builders can afford to launch their own sales incentives, SMEs can't, meaning the gap between them is only going to grow wider at this rate, he says. In housing, the budget prioritised political optics, taxing the rich, and large-scale contractor projects, the Lower Thames Crossing for £891 million, while ignoring the tailored financial intervention necessary to support the SMEs crucial for diversifying housing output. And a third major area of contradiction emerged in environmental policy, creating conflicting incentives across the built environment lifecycle. The most controversial element was the abolition of the Energy Company Obligation Scheme. RICS Chief Executive Justin Young confirmed that commitments to sustainability appear to be weakening, stating this decision has the potential to hamper the country's ambition to tackle the UK's retrofit burden. For those focused on creating high-paying jobs for the future through retrofitting existing homes to meet net emission targets, this was a clear defeat. However, on the flip side, that retreat from deep retrofit could be interpreted as a subtle win for the sectors whose business models rely on demolition, new construction, waste disposal, rather than complex preservation work. And that interpretation is strengthened by the short-term landfill tax reprieve. After listening to representations, the Chancellor decided not to proceed at this time with converging the two rates of landfill tax. This relief, which retains the low rate at £4.05p per tonne for inert materials, protects house builders from unavoidable costs, at least for now. However, the government immediately announced a consultation proposing to transition to a single rate of landfill tax by 2030, which is just 4 and a bit years away. David Gudgeon, head of external affairs at Reconomy Connect, cautioned that this future shift will be a major blow to the house building sector, relying heavily on the lower rate, possibly becoming the straw that breaks the camel's back. In other words, the budget offered temporary cost benefits now, but introduced a highly costly policy certainty for the near future. Ultimately, the contradictory nature of the budget often obscured the human reality of the sector. While the £820 million youth guarantee of free apprenticeship training for SMEs were welcomed as green shoots that could strengthen the regional skills pipeline, even this positive measure was met with scepticism by Robin Clevitt, who argued you can't grow the next generation of builders if the tax system keeps stripping cash from the very businesses expected to train and employ them. This suggests that the foundational political biases resulted in a set of conflicting policies that left the construction community feeling whipsawed. Love the word whipsawed. As Lee Wilcox concluded, the budget still fails to confront is that tradespeople are people first, working in a sector with some of the highest suicide rates in the UK. He emphasised that true growth demands that mental health, job security, and late payment issues sit centrally in the national conversation, not just the financial calculus of tax and skills. So, in summary, the 2025 budget was less a unified strategy and more a collection of contradictory policy demands reflecting the competing interests and political pressures the government faces. It may have delivered to the Treasury's balance sheet at the expense of stability for small businesses, offered short-term cost relief for house builders while deterring long-term investment, and prioritised new construction over the critical but unglamorous challenge of retrofitting. But did we really expect anything else? There you are. There you are. That s- save you going over all of that. As I say, we have produced a document on that. I think I've put it in the chat. Let me do it again because I actually had the foresight of putting it behind a button. There you are. It's called Budget 2025. The industry reacts. All of those comments and reactions will be there, along with a whole host of others. Worked furiously to get that one out. In actual fact, I worked so furiously that we've had another couple of comments come in this morning from, among others, the Construction Equipment Association, who were unfortunately about 12 hours too late. It was done and dusted before they could comment on yesterday's budget. But the point I was trying to make with all of that was I think a lot of us had already made up our minds. To the point where, Rachel Reeves could have stood up in Parliament yesterday and said, we've really looked at this and we're going to send a cheque for 10,000 quid to every single household in the country. There would have still been some saying, can I have it by a bank transfer? I don't do cheques. I do think there's a degree of that. But the biggest one for me, and I said this at the top of the show, was this apparent outrage at raising wages. Now, I know Jim's made some very valid arguments about, people being paid what they are worth. But given the rising cost of living in the UK and beyond, but the rising cost of living here in the UK, people are struggling to pay their bills. They're struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to get to work, and so on down the line. I would have thought that it would be quite hard to argue that a rise in wages was a bad thing, and yet they were queuing to do so. Now, again, I think part of that is because the argument is skewed by the people that are actually speaking. I think if you were to go to the average demolition or construction site and talk to the people on site, particularly the younger ones, the ones that are coming up through the ranks, and say you're going to be earning more money as a result of this come April, I'm sure they'd, oh, well, that's good news. I'd have liked a bit more, but that's at least some good news. And yet, most of the reactions seem to be, oh, terrible thing. We won't be able to afford, or we won't be able to recruit as many people. We won't be able to retain as many people. We won't be able to train as many people. Yeah, it's a hard one to argue, and I just wonder. I mean, obviously, with any argument, there is the right, there is the wrong, and there's somewhere in the middle is kind of the reality. I wonder with that one whether the government, whether the Treasury, whether everybody has actually given it sufficient insightful thought. There was a comment earlier today on LinkedIn from Andy Stevens over at the Build Network talking about what do we need to do about mental health. And my suggestion, which I put on his LinkedIn post, was basically a day of action, or more specifically, a day of inaction. If you really want people to stand up or sit up and take notice, you kind of need to sock them between the eyes. And I wonder if that's the case with this as well. As an industry, we employ somewhere between 2.5 to 3 million people. That will then have a knock-on effect locally, regionally, nationally. If you're paying somebody in Cambridge, they're probably spending most of their money in Cambridge. They help. We all know how the economy works. We're also a major contributor to the national economy. Apparently, I don't know quite how they figure this out, but every pound invested in the construction industry in this country basically generates £3.30 for the national economy. So we're a major contributor to GDP. We're a major employer, if not one of the biggest employers in the entire country. And yet, time and time and time again, as an industry, we are bent over and soundly rogered. Tax, VAT, materials costs, fuel costs, removal of the red diesel rebate, and so on down the line. We talked about it at the top of the show. I think it was Ken that mentioned it in the first place. We've seen the cost of electric vehicles, those on the road, suddenly hiked as a result of yesterday, with the government desperately keen to retain their fuel duty income. So that's what they've done with EVs. It's only a matter of time before we do the same thing with, or before they do the same thing with electric equipment. So for the last almost a decade, we've been told that electric vehicles are the future, or electric equipment is the future. It's cleaner, it's greener, it's quieter. We've got low emission zones and ultra low emission zones. So, we want you to invest in these machines that will be better for local people, better for the environment, even though they're more expensive. We're not, we're not certain of the technology, but we need you to invest in all of these. And then at some point in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, somebody will come along and say, those electric vehicles that you've already paid through the nose for, yeah, we're going to tax your electricity as well. That's what they're going to do. And unless the industry as a whole, and I'm talking about the construction industry, the demolition industry, the mining industry, what there is of it, the agricultural industry, and the waste industry as well, unless they get their heads together and sit down and say, oh, no, we're not having that. We've invested all of this, put in all of this infrastructure. We've paid through the nose for all this electric equipment, and now you're going to charge us more for the electricity that we so desperately need? No. And if you try to push that through, we're down in tools. And we're down in tools for a day. That's going to cost the nation millions. And unless you start to sort out your brains, we'll do it again in 6 weeks' time. And unless you've made some sort of sensible decision by then, we'll do it again. But we won't. What we will actually do is the same thing that we always do. We will sit and sit and sit and, our costs have gone through the roof. Oh, bloody hell. Jim says, my lad is an apprentice on a minimum wage, but is expected to show a new starter how to operate his loading shovel, even though the other fellow is in £2 more because of how the minimum wage is set. That's nonsense. That's a nonsense. Just because the other lad is over 21, it's bollocks. Jim, it is. It is officially bollocks. That is absolute nonsense. Age doesn't matter. It's attitude and skill that determines what someone's worth. Yeah, I totally agree. Andy says, I have an EV car and the new charge is almost identical to the amount of money per month I used to spend on petrol. What a weird coincidence. What a weird coincidence. It's almost like that was the idea. Isn't that strange? And I mean, I don't know how you get by, Andy, and please understand this. I would have a Tesla tomorrow. I don't need a Tesla, but I'd have a Tesla tomorrow. I think they're a fantastic vehicle. I like the whole thing about them. I really do. I think Elon Musk is a complete and utter tit, but I love the car. Would have a Tesla in a heartbeat. But one of my mates, I've said this before, one of my mates has a Tesla, and he's had to rejig his entire life. He's rewired the house. He's put solar panels on the house. When we are going somewhere, if I'm traveling from where I am in Surrey to Manchester, let's just say Surrey to Manchester, I will go out of my house, get myself to the M25, M40, all the way up, M42, and away we go. That would be not my mate. My mate does these great arcing fucking journeys because over there's a supercharger, so that will get me on the. I mean, I might stop for a cup of coffee or a pee. I'm a man of a certain age. I'll probably stop for a pee on the way up. He will stop at least once. And when he stops at least once, he'll stop for an hour. I might stop for as long as it takes to drain the bladder. He'll stop for an hour. Not only that, when we get there, I will have, by and large, I would have chosen a hotel or an Airbnb that is A, most convenient, and B, as cheap as I can possibly spend, because I'm stingy like that. He will have chosen a more expensive and more remote hotel because it happens to have the charging infrastructure that he needs to get his car back on the road. Completely changed his way of life. So he's paid a lot of money for a Tesla. It's made his life more difficult and more challenging, travel more difficult and more challenging. And now, lo and behold, it's actually going to cost him exactly the same amount of money. Dan saying Tesla very uncomfortable. Wouldn't have one. Not my experience. I've taken a few for a spin. One a very quick spin. One a very a quite prolonged spin. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I can get from Essex to Leeds on one charge. To be honest, there are chargers everywhere now. They're more expensive to use than if I filled up with diesel. So there is a thing that's been lost in all of this as well. And I realise I can't be outraged in both directions, but on this occasion, I'm going to be. You've made electric vehicles. I'm talking to Rachel Reeves because she's a big viewer of the show. You've made electric vehicles more expensive to fuel, which I don't entirely agree with. But was the idea of electric vehicles not to improve the atmosphere? If you have made them more expensive than a diesel or a petrol car to fill up, have you not just triggered a lot of people saying, well, I've got an EV car, but sod that for a game of soldiers, I'm going back to petrol again? So yes, you might have balanced your coffers, Rach, me old darling, but at the same time, you've absolutely kicked the knackers out of the planet. Was that the intention? I thought you lot were all green and stuff. Listen, I regardless of your thoughts on this government or any other government in history, they do have a very, very, very difficult job. You know, you can't please all the people all the time. Trust me, I live by that. You can't please all the people all the time, and if you give to one, it generally means you're taking away from another, and so on down the line. But I was kind of hoping that all things environmentally based was sacrosanct. We need to balance the books. We need to give people a fair wage, but surely none of any of that should come at the cost of the planet. That to me makes no sense. It just makes my head hurt, if I'm being completely honest. Anyway. Oh, hang on a minute. What we've got here. I appreciate it costs money to set up the infrastructure, but the charge is ongoing long after the charging station has been paid for. Yeah, they've been a nice little owner, haven't they? The one, this is not a charging station. The one I always hark back to is the Dartford Crossing. Dartford Crossing. I don't know how many of you know. Not far from your part of the world, Andy. It was built under PFI, Private Finance Initiative. So I can't remember who it was, but a bunch of people, major contractors, said, we'll build it free of charge, but we will charge a toll for it, but no cap. So that was built 30 plus years ago, and every day, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions of vehicles go across that bridge and cough up as a result. Like charging stations. Anyone that thinks their job is difficult is in the wrong job. You should try sitting here sometime, Jim. And Dan saying, have a great weekend, guys. Stay safe. Dan, I appreciate the thought, but you could be here tomorrow and you can still chat. I can't actually vet it in any way, but you can still have a chat. And was to be free when paid for 20 years ago. Yes. Yeah, funny that, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, people, that's me done for this week. As I say, I'm at a funeral tomorrow. The show will go on without me. Probably be better for it, to be perfectly honest with you. So tune in if you wish, if you dare. The show will happen tomorrow at 10 a.m. Regardless of where you're watching today, it will repeat again tomorrow. Chris Ford says, I've never had a job. I've played at it for years. You and me both, my friend. You and me both. I'm still waiting for the knock on the door from somebody to say, we've heard you call yourself a journalist. We need to speak to you about that. It's only a matter of time. And safe travel, Skipper. Thank you very much indeed for that. Jim, everybody, go and have a fantastic day. Keep your coffers close to your hip because Rachel Reeves is out there. She'll grab it from out under your nose if you're not paying attention. Peter McKenna, I know last minute just had doctors round. Could still be in here for another week. Peter, you have my best wishes, my friend. But you are literally last minute because I'm heading out the door. Everybody have a fantastic day. Have a great weekend. I'll be back tomorrow. No, I won't be back tomorrow. The show will. I'll be back on Monday. Until then, everybody have a fantastic weekend. See you soon. Thanks for your input.